researching gangs. And I guess in my world, it's probably one of the most intriguing, interesting, difficult, challenging, but something that definitely grabs my interest. And I meet loads of different people that ask questions like, Craig, how do you get so close? How do you, be able to interview individuals that enables you to be able to shape research and shape ways in which, people think and behave in terms of professional development. And I guess to bring it all the way down, for those that are watching this that are thinking, you know what, Craig, how do I research gangs? I'm doing an assignment, I'm doing a dissertation, I'm thinking about doing my master's degree, I'm thinking about doing a PhD. And I guess partly throughout this series, what you're gonna notice is me just giving you a little bit of gems, and maybe from my vantage point and how I look at this particular thing and any subject may enable you to start thinking about creative ways, effective ways, whether you think about different research methods to be able to engage in these particular things. And I guess where I would always begin is, number one, understanding what do you mean when we say words like researching gangs. Now, I guess one of the things that I think is really interesting in the context of the UK or the context of Europe is that when we talk about the label, the term, the word gang, it's a loaded term. We can look at gangs from a range of different perspectives, and it can be something as simple as, the group of three people, and those three groups of individuals that may have particular characteristics, and we can kind of define that to be a gang. And I guess when we start to look at the research, and we will probably talk about some of the books and some of the reports that I'm looking at around this particular subject in a moment. But I guess one of the things that we recognize and understand is that when I just said that term gang is a loaded term, what you'll probably discover is across the kind of European context that there isn't actually a consensus in terms of what a gang is. So one of the things that I oftentimes look at is some of the leading gang writers, around the country, and people that are intrigued and researching gangs and try to have a basic understanding. And I guess one of the things that you'll probably pick up in the research, and one of the things that you probably identify, is that you'll find some writers will be either talking about the characteristics of what a gang is, meaning the behaviors, the things that you may see, the things that you may, or they may essentially engage in terms of criminal behavior. And you've also got other writers that may talk about gangs through the lens of structure, meaning in terms of demographical space. They may be talking about landscape. They may talk about hierarchy in terms of leaders, particular individuals within the group that may have specific roles. And then you might have individuals that are then being either used or exploited, runners. These are terminologies you hear sometimes within the context, but also you hear young people utilize these terminologies. And I guess from my vantage point as a researcher, as someone that really tries to be contemporary in the way that I think, I argue or make the call for looking at gangs through a UK lens, and I say there's nothing wrong with using both. Use the structure, use the characteristics to make it make sense to what you see within your region. And I think that's the added part that I think in terms of my work when I look at gang research, is that I argue that there needs to be an intersection between structure, characteristics, in order for us to understand the way gangs operate within each and different categories throughout the country. So another example, London is very different to Birmingham. Manchester is very different to Liverpool. Not far, very similar, but the cultures that you may discover amongst different children and young people, and also based on landscapes, you may have an estate, you may have cities where you don't really have estates, but you have streets and cul-de-sacs. And based on the structure of any area or any environment, that may actually shape the way in which groups behave, the way that groups that may have conflict with other groups, and the pathways in which they may have those particular conflicts on the street. And all of those different things are or should be taken into consideration when you're thinking about researching gangs. And I guess there's another element that I think is really important for those of you that are thinking about, going into research around these particular areas. I think you have to also think of it through an ethical lens. We have to be really ethical in the way that we do things. What do I mean specifically? We have to be mindful because you're working with people, you're working with human beings. You may want to gain some real insight into understanding, for example, why young people between the age of, let's say, 13 and 18, why they carry knives, And throughout your questionnaire or your survey, you're trying to get that quantitative data in trying to understand the numbers. But there might be some of you that might be thinking, oh, well, surveys, questionnaires that will kind of give me the data and statistics to help with my study. There's actually a real insight that I want to gain from a qualitative perspective, where I actually want to speak to people, I want to interview people. Now, a few things that you just may need to consider, and I think this is partly why these types of series are really important. So I normally get an email and I'll frame it this way. My name is Paul, and I'm a student at Birmingham City University, or I'm a student at Nottingham Trent. And I am deciding to do a dissertation about researching gangs. I know you, Craig, as an individual that has worked with gangs, an individual that works in partnership with organizations that support individuals on the periphery or involved in gang membership and so on and so forth. I wondered if you can connect me with some of those young people, because I want to do a dissertation to ascertain why young people are carrying knives between the age of 13 and 18. Now I'm going to pause for a moment and I want you to think about what I would potentially say. And normally, what I often sometimes say is no. And do you know why? Because I'm also very ethical in the way in which I approach working with children and young people. You are a total stranger. And a total stranger that works with a bunch of young people that are also totally strange, think about it both ways. The relationship perspective is always going to be an issue. Now we've got to take into consideration the label gang. And we're talking about potentially young people that are territorial, young people that don't really like talking about themselves, the groups, the things that they get up to. So there has to be also a level of trust. So one of the things that I talk about when researching gangs is that we have to be very mindful. We have to be very ethical. We have to be very human in our experiences. If for those of us that really want to get that real ethnographic, quantitative data, we have to start thinking about creative ways in order to do that. So I guess one quick tip that I can leave you with today is for those of you that are interested in working with groups of individuals, one place that may be good to start is maybe speaking to individuals, not just like myself, but other individuals that work directly with children and young people that may be involved in these particular things that you're worried and concerned about, and get their perspective on how they view the groups, the things they see, the changes, the development over a particular time frame, if what you're looking at. But if you're saying that you want to really be amongst individuals that may live those particular lifestyles, why not volunteer at a local youth centre? Why not volunteer at a local community centre? So you can start to acknowledge, be around, experience young people in general. And then those young people in that particular environment, when they start to get used to you in an environment, then just maybe, if you want to get an understanding of why young people carry knives, for example, maybe the first starting point for you to then think about your second point about researching gangs. Because ultimately, I operate from what is called an insider perspective. And that insider perspective, I have to take into consideration where I live, the people I've grew around, the schools I went to, the relationships that I have in the local community, that gives me the visibility within my community that I'm able to reach and connect to individuals that may want to share their stories or share their perspectives, because I'm seen as a credible messenger, or I'm seen as an individual that can be trusted in the local community. And I just wanted to throw that out there for those of you that are thinking about researching groups, gangs, for example, to really kind of think about the kind of ethical way in which we potentially may look at these particular issues, and get you to understand that it's not easy. As I said, working with gangs for over 15 years has been really difficult in sometimes just getting a young person to just connect and open up, even though they know me. So just be very mindful for those of you that are thinking about, I really want to research gangs. I really want to get into this. Attach yourself to individuals like myself and other individuals that are looking into this world, and look at their ways, their methods, how they've worked with different types of young people that may potentially be involved, and then start thinking about your ways in which how you're going to do your research, and then hopefully we'll work from there. And I guess the last, most important part, of this video is to ask you the question really, what other topic would you like me to think about or talk about around the context of research. Is there something more specific you want me to look at? Whether it's research methods, whether it's to do with how do you analyze data, or it might just be something of another element that I may have said but didn't elaborate on. Talk to me in the comment section. Let us know what type of things you'll be interested in. And then when we start our next season, most definitely it is something that we'll utilize. Researching gangs, few books that I have on my shelf that I'm looking at or utilize really just to stimulate my thinking and have done over the years. Building a Black Criminology is one of my favorite books from a theoretical perspective. Just really kind of gives me insight into how I want to kind of build myself as a criminologist, utilizing the lens of race, class and gender, and how that fits. And you heard me use the word apparatus to do that. I love James Gillian's work on violence. One of the things I really like is about him talking about, you know, things around hurt, guilt, shame, and some of the kind of antidotes to how people become violent. Another book that I'm really inspired by is also one of my friends and colleagues. It's called Homicide and Organized Crime by Dr. Mohammed Rahman. Really interesting book for those that are thinking about, working or trying to understand organized criminality. Another interesting book for those that work or want to work in the context of prison, or interested in the room. There's people that are probably from an area of faith, or just really asking the question of how can faith be used in order to shape individuals that are involved in violent behaviors away from crime. So Faith, Identity and Homicide by Dr. Shona Robinson Edwards is also a good book. Ethnography, research methods. Can't talk about research if you're not thinking about research methods, because I use a lot of qualitative methods to get the real insights from individuals. I love that book that I utilize. And then I guess a few books really just to kind of shape my thinking around gangs and violence. As I said, there's a few that are not here. Very interesting book called Youth, Gangs and Violence, Social Respect by Rob White. And I guess one of the historical books that many would remember, Reluctant Gangsters by John Pitts. And then obviously my usual criminological or criminology books with all of the theories that are in there are also good. And then I love Cohen's work, Moral Panic, talking about states of denial. And I'm actually utilizing this book for something that I'm currently writing at the moment. I'm writing a chapter about what I call the insider perspective, what's made me connect to all of the things that I'm talking about. So a few books that might can help you in terms of your journey. Over and out.